is the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast, brought to you by Cisco. Cisco is here to help set you up for success by delivering high-quality foods, products, and services for your restaurant. Recording live to digital from the NC F&B studios in downtown Raleigh. Join us as we lead you into the kitchen, inside the bottle, and into the minds of the food and beverage industry. And now, with dressing on the side, light oil, nightshade free, it's Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening and watching the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today we are on site at Carrboro Coffee Roasters, the elite coffee roaster, I'm going to say, in the country, and you're going to get to know why. And here to tell us all about it is the president, founder of it, Mr. Scott Conary.
Hello. Great to be here. Thanks for having us.
Good to have you. And next to you is your partner in crime, so to speak, the face that you all know and love, the voice that you all know and love from Carrboro Coffee Roasters, visiting us weekly, is Lane Mitchell.
Hi, how you doing?
Great.
Doing great. If you'll just get up on that mic a little bit there, Lane.
Okay.
And,
there we go.
All right. That sounds good. Perfect. Well, thank you. So, yeah, we are off-site. We are in Carrboro, and we are in your actual roaster. We're not literally being roasted right now, but we see the beautiful roaster, and that actually is a working roaster, correct? That's not just for show?
No. That's the one.
We're like, we spent a lot of money on that. Yeah, we're definitely going to use it. Yeah.
Hey, let's start there. It's a Gießen?
Correct.
Who makes that? Is that from New Zealand by any chance?
No, Gießen is a Scandinavian country.
It's not the Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
We poured that by the glass at Cafe Del Rey for like 4 years. Yeah. So what is what's the roaster all about, and why that?
So the building that we're in now is actually an extension of the original space that we started in, right? So we needed more space. This is where we expanded into. We're still roasting in the original space where we have an old 15-kilo Millennium roaster, which is a heavy steel drum roaster for those who are into roasters. We started 20-odd years ago in using more cast iron, which is just a completely different function of heat transfer, which is what you're doing when you're roasting. Mm-hmm. Heavy steel is as close as we can get to that. Gießen makes amazing heavy steel drum roasters. This is another 15-kilo batch size roaster.
So, unfortunately, we're not in the metric system, and I'm kind of like metric naive. What is 15 kilos transfer
So roughly
into?
33 pounds or so.
Okay.
Mostly, and this is sort of, I'm going to give you all the secrets. So
Awesome.
You never fill it up.
Oh, you never fill it up?
No. You need airspace for the convection to happen, right? So it's not just full of coffee. It is a certain amount of coffee. So our batch sizes are roughly 20 to 24 pounds at a time.
Of coffee.
Yep.
Okay. So this is the main thing. One of the big tenets of Carrboro Coffee Roasters in your career as a coffee roaster is the relationship with the farmers, of course. Mm-hmm. And I want to get into that more specifically. But me, I look at everything. I'm a wine guy. I look at everything through the lens of wine. And when you're growing grapes, the idea is for some of the best vignerons is, okay, I just want to get I want to get out of the way of the grapes. I want to make the best grapes possible, and then they're going to give me the best wine, right? But still, you coddle it. The way you face the way you face the rows, or the time that you pick is essential for making the wine, right? What kind of things like that in farming affect the final outcome of coffee?
Yeah, nobody likes the answer to this because it's all of them. It's too short an answer.
What's your favorite wine, Matt?
Well, here, let me make it more concise then. Are there things that you specifically ask of your farmers, or is there a particular blend that you can speak to that you've asked them to farm a certain way so that you could affect a certain result?
Yeah. So the corollary fits with agricultural products, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of variables involved, and deciding which ones to affect or maybe cultivate or maintain are very specific to whatever you're trying to accomplish. Same thing for anything you're growing. With coffee, it can be different depending on where you are and the surroundings and what the farmer is able to logistically accomplish.
Right.
So, we take that on a case-by-case basis. One example would be our friend Nancy Hernandez from Marcala, Honduras,
which is what we're drinking now. Is that right?
No.
Yeah,
that's what you poured us first.
Yeah.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
when we first started getting our coffee, it was a blend because that's how the coffee was first planted. It was 2 varietals, and it was great, but I wanted to know more.
Yeah.
Right. So we asked her, hey, what would it take for you to separate these? We would love to see the Catuai and the Bourbon separate to see what the profiles are like. Is there a difference? And when we did that, we are in full support of that. Like, we're paying for it.
Yeah.
Like, we're not asking you to do something that we're not, because it's going to require more labor and more effort. And we found a completely different profile when it's by itself that was worthwhile. Like, it was worth the effort. And it's that relationship that allows us to have that conversation in the first place. I can't just ask any random coffee grower to do that.
Yeah.
And hope it works out.
Right. And that's something specific to what you're doing, the farmer direct relationship. So let's get into that, because we know we've coffee has been always a through line for the NCF&B going 6.5 years now. We've always been connected very closely to coffee. And we know that it's like sourcing, just like wine, is such an important thing, but really it's about the humans that are involved in that sourcing. Absolutely. So tell us why that is so important to your business.
I mean, from the very start, that was one of the goals of the business. It's sure, it started with a love of coffee. That's pretty simple in a very straightforward way. But it was more about how do we adjust this paradigm that isn't taking into account the people that are actually doing the work, especially that they're doing the work on the ground. And so it started with an effort to figure out, well, what's actually happening. We're going to have to go there to find out. You can't trust anybody else to tell you everything or even enough. We didn't want any black box effect. We wanted to know what's going on inside there. And so go to the source, talk to the people, figure out what's actually happening, where they might need help, where they need support, and then figure out how we can be part of that solution. And, our needs are simple in a very straightforward way. Oh, we want the best quality coffee we can get.
Yeah.
Great. Devil's in the details. How do we get there? And how do we maintain it? So it's one thing to do it. It's another to make sure that we're continuing to do it year after year, harvest after harvest, and that the people who are doing the work are supported so that they can do that, so they can focus on it and not have to worry about anything else that's going on in their life. We're making sure that what is the actual cost of harvest? We need to know that, and a lot of people just don't know that, so that we can go over and above that, right? So we can make sure that they're getting paid appropriately for that effort.
Yeah, and with Nancy Hernandez, back to that specifically, Lane was telling us off mics how there's an intimate relationship that goes a couple of generations, and I think it was, in fact, one of her child or somebody came and worked here for a little while, and then
both
went
her
back.
and her daughter,
Yeah. So, well, that's special right there. Talking about to get to really know people.
I think it's a really great example of the things that we're trying to accomplish, and it's about building a broader economic platform for the producers. It's not just, oh, I'm selling you coffee, great, we're done.
Yeah.
It's what else can we do so that you have the means to build something bigger, to impact more people, to have a bigger ripple effect on that pond. And this was one where it seemed like a no-brainer. It seemed like, oh, wow, there's an opportunity where she wants to learn. We want to help. We hosted her, brought her here. This is Nancy specifically. And she was a sponge. She just absorbed everything. She wanted to open up a cafe.
Yeah.
But she had no resources where she lived. So we taught her how to brew all the coffees and make espressos and espresso-based drinks and roasting and everything. Let's not leave anything out, so that she could go back and open a cafe. And she did about a year later. And then following years, kept opening more cafes.
Oh, wow.
And then more years later, visited with her daughter. Hey, when my daughter's 17, can she come and do the same thing that I did? Because she's working in the cafe.
Yes.
That's
cool.
Normal.
Yeah.
And she was already doing latte art, at 12. So
Amazing.
this is the kind of thing that we wanted to build. It's generational. It's got a larger impact. It's got ongoing impact. So she now has 5 coffee shops.
That's
in the
amazing.
Marcella region. She's got all the employees, all their families. It just keeps going out further and further. And that effect is the kind of thing that we're trying to accomplish in some ways. It's just, that's the most, I consider the most beautiful story.
Yeah.
And long-term impactful.
Well, Scott, I want to know a little bit about you, or a lot about you, actually, because you're an interesting guy. But it's not easy to just open up a coffee roaster, or I guess maybe one could say it's easy and you just buy some beans and then you go from there. But that's not really the extent of what you're doing. So give us a little backstory. For one, where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
What time of my life do you need to know? Yeah, that's a longer
Conception.
story, right? St. Clair Shores, Michigan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I wasn't there long enough to even remember it.
Yeah.
Most of my family is from Maine, and we sort of slowly moved around. And my father's in the Navy, and that kind of happened. But and I kept the habit, so that kept happening. I slowly made my way south, and the whole time there was a love of coffee. I think there's nothing unique about that story, except maybe it happened at a very early age.
Pause for that.
But hey, that would be a natural time to just take a quick and brief word to our other sponsors who really also pay attention to great ingredients and great quality, and that's Sysco Foods.
And as the industry leader in food service, Sysco's reputation is on the line with every product that they deliver. That's why they ensure Sysco brand products offer the best quality and freshness every time.
First quality. Sysco products are monitored by dedicated inspectors using industry-leading standards to make sure customers receive the top ingredients available, like basil or tomatoes. That means you can count on consistency and, above all, food safety in every product.
Yeah, and as for freshness, Sysco serves up natural, hand-selected produce that's beautiful on the plate and delicious on the palate, because your menu can only be as good as the ingredients, as we were discussing, and you deserve to shop with confidence. So when you shop the best.
Visit Sysco.com, that's SYSCO.com, to discover the value of fresh, quality products from Sysco Shop.
Yeah, Sysco, at the heart of food service.
Scott, you were talking about at a young age, 11, 12 years old, liking that bitter profile and just diving in everywhere you could.
Yeah, and just wanting to experience what was possible. I mean, this is all pre-internet, so if you want to learn, you just do, right? And so it starts out simple, like just trying every coffee you can get your hand on and sort of assessing and finding some kind of baseline.
Yeah.
And then as you learn over time, like just start figuring out, like, what is it you like about it? What are you interested in? How do you figure out what is driving you beyond just, I enjoy coffee?
Yeah.
Right? And so that just sort of happened over time and led to an opportunity to sort of get into the industry and say, I want to make an impact. I want to try something different.
What was that opportunity?
Really, I started out as retail, but with retail keeping in mind that I wanted to keep going back.
Yeah.
Right. I wanted to keep going back into control of quality, of course, but really an idea of switching paradigms, because in learning about the coffee industry, even the specialty industry, you learn that things were not great, right? Things were not great for the producers specifically. There was a lot of black box effect. There was a lot of unknowns that people just didn't understand, and all the way to the consumer. But even people who are in the industry, cafe owners, sometimes even roasters, were just kind of operating on, this is what exists.
Yeah.
And my desire was to figure out, what is that? How do we make it better? And who do we have to talk to figure that out? And I realized, well, you have to talk to the people doing the work.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you say those things, it makes me think it's like, and you tell me if I'm wrong, it makes me think, so at that point, I don't know, not to age you, but we're probably in like
Ageless.
Yeah,
Ageless.
80s, early 90s or mid 90s, you're kind of figuring this out. So that tells me like the big, quote unquote, evil empires of the world, right? Like the big coffee companies. I'll name
are not
them.
named.
Yeah, or if you don't want me to name them, fine. But
Talking about Dunkin'? Pete's?
well, I was thinking that time.
Hey,
would be
if
like
you grew up in the Northeast,
Folgers,
Dunkin' drove us.
Dunkin',
all.
yeah. But so they're setting the price for the coffee beans. They're setting the standards. They're controlling the market and probably trying to push every cent of what they can out of every bean.
Oh, of course. I mean, I would say they're a player. I mean, there's larger factors involved. The coffee is traded as a commodity.
Yeah.
So it's part of that structure as well that we were trying to do an end run around. Like we wanted to get away from that limiting experience, because it's a very low ceiling.
Yeah.
And doesn't really help the people who are actually doing the work. It helps the people buying the coffee.
Right.
It allows you to maybe situate yourself as someone who's buying coffee and be a little less risk. If you're risk aversive, then it helps you in that sense. But it's not about coffee at that point. It's just numbers and it's things that you're just pushing around. And so it doesn't have anything to do with quality. It doesn't have anything to do with the people doing the work. So let's ignore that, which is what I wanted to do, and let's go find out what's actually happening and how can we fix the things that aren't working well, like No one's getting paid appropriately. Conditions are really bad. Resources are horrible. Producers don't even know if they're going to sell their coffee year to year. Forget about what they're going to get.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, imagine if I wanted to hire you for a job. I said, hey, I got a job for you. I'll pay you at the end of the year.
All right. No.
I'm not sure what I'm going to pay you.
Right.
But do all this
But
really
do all
hard
the
labor
work for a year, and then we'll talk about it after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that's not tenable.
But that's also because it seems like, for the most part, that the coffee is grown in these rural, almost, dare I say, third world or suffering economy geography that probably sets they're already behind the eight ball, so to speak, to begin with.
Sure, there's historical information you can follow to figure out how they got there in the first place, but being taken advantage of is what they're used to.
Right.
And that's what we wanted to change. And we knew it would take time. There's no way I'm going to walk in there and everybody's going to greet me like I'm some kind of hero. And that's not what we wanted. We wanted a conversation. We wanted to understand. And in order to show people that you're honest about that is roll up your sleeves, get to work, do something. And so volunteering was the big part of how do I figure this thing out and how do I help people while doing it. You know, doing work for USAID, going into a country and trying to help things and learning all the time while
What's
doing
USAID?
it. Oh, USAID is a governmental program that does support in various countries around the world. The U.S. basically supports different programs. They can be farming programs, but they can be other things. And they allow for development and sustainability and support in various aspects.
Yeah.
A lot of agriculture, but not just agriculture.
Okay.
Well, coffee is like such a weird industry in that if we're doing inventories like in a bar program, I'm counting ounces, half ounces, quarter ounces of, you know, my chartreuse or my vodka or my bourbon or whatever. But coffee's weird in that, like, we're dumping more than we're even selling many times at places. Right now, granted, if you're slammed and you got a line out the door, you're probably brewing fresh and not really dumping a lot. But there's also that, you know, the big evil empire company that I may or may not have worked for while working at Barnes & Noble as my first job.
Excellent.
We were told no matter what, dump the coffee after the timer goes off. I can't remember if it was an hour and a half or so. Like, you're just always dumping coffee. So it's not even about the specific individual ounces of the product you're making as much as it is the relationship and the process of like what you're doing. I would say like maybe you think of it differently too. You're like, no, every ounce counts. But there is a point where quality is more important than every unit being sold. So you would prefer to get rid of quote unquote like bad quality so that you're only selling the right stuff. But we don't do that in any other industry. We're not like just dumping tons of beer or tons of vodka because it went bad or so, you know, and so it really is more about that relationship that you have and the flow and the process, so much more than any other type of beverage that I could even think of.
You touched on a lot of great points, and I'll try to hit all of them. I mean, the volatility of this product is key. That's what you're getting at the heart of what you're saying.
Yeah.
And it's unlike anything else. Other things are bottled and you're good, you know? Sure, there's a date, but it's years. Right, it's not
right,
hours or minutes, and so I think that's really important to keep in mind. In a perfect world, we're balancing those two things of making sure the quality is maintained and not wasting. You know, one of the things you learn when you're in the fields and working with actual producers is how cherished this thing is and how every grain matters. Like it's all their money, their future. And you take, you know, if you're paying attention, I think you take that back and you take it in and you apply that to what you're doing and try to find the best possible way to preventatively not waste to the degree that you can while still maintaining quality. But to your point of like maybe doing a comparison of wine, you know, as I said, agricultural, there's a lot of connections there. There's a lot of parallels. There's a certain point where you are done processing that wine, you put it in a bottle and you're done.
Yeah.
Right? Open it now, open it later, let it breathe, whatever. Pretty small amount of impact after you've bottled it. Mm-hmm. With coffee, every step impacts what you are eventually going to taste. You know, whether it's the processing of that coffee right after, that would be the cutoff point. Then it needs to go somewhere, right? It's not being roasted for the most part where it was grown. Mm-hmm. It's starting to change a little bit, but for the most part, that's still true. And then we have to roast it to the point where we're maintaining quality. And that is one of the main things that we like to make sure people understand. We're not creating quality. That quality has to already be there. Mm-hmm. We're teasing it out and we're maintaining it so we don't lose it. And that requires constant diligence, quality control, quality assurance over time as that green coffee starts to change slowly over time. And that is just that first step once it's on our shores, right? Then that coffee has to go to a cafe. And every step along the way there, how do they store it? How do they brew it? Will change that experience.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to screw it up every step of the way.
I mean,
right?
One would say,
It is that fucking special.
thank you, Anthony. Yeah, because it really is. I mean, what? It
It is that fucking special.
really is that special.
Gotta get a new drop.
Oh shit.
So, Anthony Guerra always makes an appearance on the show every time. So back in the day when I was 16, this is after I left that large company working inside of Barnes & Noble, I actually worked at a small independent coffee shop called Orchard Valley Coffee in Campbell, California.
Okay.
I don't know if you know it. I think it might still be around. Anyone that knows in that area is like, oh, that is the best coffee shop. And that was a place where, at least for me, I went from not understanding really coffee at all because the Barnes & Noble job didn't really get into the craft of it. They're just like, it's a shot of this and steam milk this, don't burn the milk, boom, boom, boom.
The
make
recipes
drink.
were important, but not necessarily how you did it.
Yeah. But we were really roasting coffee at this secondary job that I got. And I worked there for a good while, and it was all run by people that were very heady and cared about, the beans and all. They were all a bunch of drug addicts too, by the way, which is why at 16, and I was a very stone cold sober kid, the owner would only entrust me with all the night NO2 chargers for whipped cream. He's like, Max, everyone else would just do whippets all night long. So I'm going to give you the keys to this little lockbox. And when we need to make whipped cream, you're the one making it. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Aside from that, it's where I really started to understand like the roasting process. We roasted every Tuesday morning. And when we did that, it was like the Pied Piper. I mean, as soon as we did it, like everyone came from all around the neighborhood and they're like, oh, we can smell the fresh roasted beans. Like, we want to come in here. We want to try the coffee that day. So, could we get into a little roasting conversation?
Absolutely.
I would love to hear, like, for one, like what you do. I mean, you talked from the green to the roast. Like, what is this? I love to hear how that bean is roasted properly.
Okay, so I'm trying to find a way to make it, a shorter version.
Fun.
So yeah, sure. and fun.
Interesting. Yeah. No.
And hopefully it's I come from a scientific background, and so I tend to gravitate that way in my explanations. So just stop me when it becomes an issue. Green coffee, as I said, is the place where it is stored for the most part before we roast it, and it is the place where it has
behind us here. Those
behind
bags
you,
are green coffee. Yeah.
Yep, 60 to 69 kilo bags are roughly what we get. 150 pounds, 130, 150 pounds.
Really got another metric system of being coffee.
It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
Right?
Step it up, Matt. It's a base 10 system. It's easy. Come on.
So, and that's our fitness program because we have to move them. So that's what we do.
Lean. Muscular. Yep.
And I always tell people, if you ever want to know what it's like to haul a dead body, like really, that's the reality. Don't watch TV; it doesn't tell you anything. That's where it has a chance to be stored the longest, right? It's still changing, but it's changing slowly, and so we still have to keep up on it. We still have to check it, make sure it's still the coffee we think it is, or do we need to adjust the roasts? When coffee comes in, actually, we get samples before it comes in. Those are pre-shipped samples. We have little, you can't quite see them from here, but we've got little sample roasters, right? So we can try little amounts without wasting coffee. We figure out profiles, we figure out possibilities, and then sometimes it's an actual purchase decision, or sometimes it's just, hey, how's this coffee this harvest? People we've been buying from for 15 plus years. And maybe we need to describe it differently. This is a different harvest. It may not be the same coffee. It could be completely different. And then there's all these checks along the way. Before it leaves the harbor, we get a sample. When it lands, we get a sample. And then when it actually comes in, is this the same as the sample? We got to check. Mm-hmm. And then when we think we figured out the profile, especially if it's a new coffee, we're going to do iterations of roasting to figure out how does this coffee want to be roasted? Mm-hmm. What is the best way for this coffee? Because there is not one way.
I imagine.
And every coffee is completely different from where it was grown, the varietals, how it was processed, the density of it, the water content, all change the way that coffee will be roasted and then its ultimate flavor profile at the end. Then we scale it up to the larger.
So it's a bunch of different micro roastings.
Yeah,
and then
roasting, yep.
And then once you've dialed it in,
Yep.
then you get it on the big roaster.
Exactly. And then we're not done. We're still checking it.
Yeah.
Is this still what we think it's supposed to be? Do we need to tweak it at all?
So like, I don't know. You touched on it. What are some of the things you make different? Like, what are some of the things you change based on the initial product?
One of the great things about, I think, I mean, some people argue, modern day we have electronics that allow us to guide a roast. We see a roast curve, right? So it's heat application when a coffee is first in the roaster and it starts absorbing the heat, right? That's an endothermic reaction. It starts to absorb everything. And then at some point it reaches capacity and starts to change and starts to give off heat and sort of shares heat with all the other coffee. And then you start to see the temperature rise, right? So you have initial drop and then a temperature rise. That curve, a lot of people, you'll hear the end points of that curve. People will talk about the color, the time. Like, those are okay. Those are tools.
Yeah.
They don't really tell you what happened,
Okay.
right? They tell you how it finished. The curve tells you what happened. So you can get to the same endpoint multiple ways. And that's what we're paying attention to. And you can do it without a computer, but it's obviously quite helpful to see live roasting happen.
Like for an understandable way to wrap our heads around it, is that like slow cooking versus high heat kind of thing?
It's all heat transfer.
Yeah.
Right. And what is that doing to the seed? Right? How is that affecting what's inside? Because ultimately you want to get inside. And if you do it too fast, you're only cooking the outside. Do it
Okay,
too
so-
slow, you're going to bake it out.
That makes sense.
Let's get down to brass tacks. Like, we're drinking the Nicaragua blend right now, right?
Yeah.
So, like, how was this processed? What did you do specifically for this roast?
El Bosque is the natural.
Putting you on the spot here, I
Yeah.
don't remember.
So it's a Pacamara varietal. It's a larger seed,
Okay.
right? So right away you got size and volume issues to think about. We are always checking the density and the water content in there because that's going to affect how it absorbs heat and how it transfers heat. So all of that is going to be part of how do we figure out the right way to roast this natural processed coffee, which means the cherry, and we should probably back way up and talk about coffee,
Yeah.
is a cherry.
Yeah.
It dries around the seed, right? And the seed is what we know as coffee.
Okay. Yeah, because right, it's on a plant. It's a green kind of berry. It has
When
like
it's immature. And
when it's
then it
immature,
ripens. Yeah.
then it ripens, and then it's effectively like it looks like a cherry, like the way
does.
you would know a Rainier or something like that.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, but you're taking the seed inside,
Exactly.
what we call a seed, but that's the bean, right? I mean,
Well, it's not a bean, but it is a seed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're stuck with that word.
we
I think,
we
but
call it
it's
beans,
not a
but
bean.
it is a seed.
It's a seed. Yeah.
It's a seed. It's a pit.
Right.
Yep.
And that's
Okay.
that's where we get it from.
Wait, so just to finish up that conversation, so so you get that in, you figure it out, and then you turn up the heat, you turn down the heat, you change the amount of water. What are the specific
So
tactics?
the roaster allows you to apply heat and airflow differently to change that curve. You know, when is it absorbing heat? How much heat? When is the energy into the machine? And how is the coffee absorbing that and or interacting with the rest of the coffee in the drum as it turns?
Yeah.
That's really what you're controlling. And when you're watching the curve, think of how to flatten or peak a curve, right? So I've got an endpoint. I can get to it this way, or I can get to it this way, or somewhere in between.
Yeah.
All of those will give me something different.
Okay, so that's now
There's a lot of opinions on how you flatten the curve. Yeah,
full circle on that is back to my initial question that we started off with. Is there ever a time where you're in the vineyard, you're in Nicaragua, you're in Ecuador, you're in Honduras, and you're looking at how they're farming, and you're already doing the corollary and saying, oh, if they're going to farm this way, I'm going to roast X way?
It's a little early at that stage, at the plant stage. The things that you do take away from that are the varietal, and you can tell a little bit about what is making up that coffee. So, there are sugars involved in the cherry that are hopefully being transferred. That's why you wait for it to be mature. We do bricks measurements of sugar content and sort of figure out what's possible, but it's just ideas. It doesn't give you a true answer. They're just more tools. They're just more information. Data's great, and they can help guide you, but they're not an answer per se, right? That's just experience that you learn over time, and you start to make those logical jumps.
Okay.
That are all experience based.
All right. So here you are. You're taking every possible step to ensure quality. Mm-hmm. Now, as again, I'm going to make a lot of wine parallels, but what is the level of your average consumer? How are they perceiving this quality? Because in the wine world,
I think this all the time.
yeah, we're
About
still
wine and coffee. And beer and everything.
Yeah. We still like the number one seller.
What do the
is still
dum-dums want?
Freaking Miami, and it's like people tell you about that even when they're coming to a wine tasting to glean your expertise, and they're still talking about, oh, well, is it like Miami? How's it different? And I'm just like, really? So
yeah, this is an asshole question. That's fine. These are wine nerds. And by the way, if you're listening and you're offended, you're the reason. I mean, for real. Like if you're like, well, I don't even know the difference of this, then it's like, well, okay, then that's fine. And this is not for you. But this is high level coffee. We're also talking about high level wine or high level beers and high level anything. If you're chocolate, whatever, if you're looking at things and you have a discerning palate, you're going to care about these minute little details. But if you don't, ignorance is bliss, and you can go and get your Sanka and pretend like it's 1961, and you're fine. So that is good for you. Unfortunately, both Matt, myself, and I imagine the two of you are burdened with the fact that our palates are awesome, and it's difficult to drink and eat and consume crap.
we have seen the light.
Yeah, we've taken the pill, my friend. So yeah. So
I mean,
why do you go to all this work to make it?
For me, I think I take a bunch of steps back, and I think about where was I at some point along this path, right? And I've been that person. I'm the guy drinking Dunkin' in the drive-through.
Yeah,
drive-through then, but and I think of it as sort of a percentage game. Education is really important to us because we know that people can care. If you give them a reason to care, not all of them will care. That's fine. I don't want 100%. It's not reasonable. But how many can I get to care? Right? How many can I change their minds about what's possible in coffee? And maybe I do it one person at a time. I don't know, but I'm going to try. And that's what we do as an industry. That's what we do as our company. Whether it's as a roastery or as a cafe, we're going to keep sort of putting that out there on every different level that we can for consumers and give them reasons to care. They may never, but we're going to give them opportunities, and then it's on them to sort of figure out where to connect, and do they connect? And they may not connect with flavor. There's plenty of people who will never be able to tell the difference of some of these coffees.
Yeah.
But maybe they care about the mission. Maybe they care about what we're doing and how it's different. Maybe that's the reason they'll keep drinking it. And then maybe over time, they will be able to tell the difference. You just never really know. And so we have to find...
That's actually a great response to that.
We have to find those opportunities, and they're hard in a cafe setting because sometimes you have 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Right? 5 seconds. Maybe you have a minute. If you have a minute to talk to a customer, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And we want to take that opportunity to say, hey, here's what you're drinking. At the very least, tell them what coffee this is and where it came from and who did the work.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe they'll walk away and come back some other day and have an epiphany.
That's what I love about. I was just in wine country in Oregon, and one of the things I love about the Portland scene is the dining scene is anytime, and we do it to some extent here, but in Portland it's like on steroids. Anytime somebody puts a dish in front of you, whether you're a coffee shop, they tell you exactly where it came from, and are like, wow, that's hyper local. Love that. So,
yeah, and Scott, using like therapist speak, what I'm hearing you say to me is that even if you don't know what we're doing and you don't get it to the extent of the flavor level, you're not that master sommelier or master, and we're going to get into this, the master or the head judge that you are in coffee, that doesn't even matter. If you also are socially conscious about coffee and the way things are run, then at least you might buy into what we're doing here solely for the fact that we're trying to do this in the most ethical way possible, and maybe even in the most financially a positive sense for multiple industries, not just your own, And so I like that. So it's like, maybe Matt, to go back to like the wine side, to all your Miami fans or all of like the people that guzzle down that New Zealand Sauv Blanc that you love so much.
Hey, I don't hate New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, well, we did mention Gießen earlier. Yeah. But maybe it's just like, okay, at least know where it's coming from. And I will say this to all the Miami people. It's not all Pinot Noir, folks. It's only 75% Pinot Noir because legally that's what you can do in California. And that's just a law that we created here. But for people that really care about wine, if you're going to drink Pinot Noir, it needs to be 100% Pinot Noir. And they're just getting by on a technicality because of a law that we have that allows you to do this. And it's like, don't do that. Don't drink that stuff. Sorry.
I think from my point of view, it's who knows when that turning point is going to happen.
Yeah.
Just give them the opportunity for them to turn and figure it
Yeah.
out. If they never have the opportunity, yeah, of course it's not going to happen. So what kind of opportunities can we create for them?
Yeah.
How do we create that window for them to look through and be like, okay, I'm not interested now. Maybe a year from now it'll pop.
Yeah, it's like the gateway drug. But this is I guess as you as a business owner, you're selling these. Now, my impression of your business beyond the 3 cafes is like your bread and butter is selling to restaurants and more B2B kind of.
I think it's pretty even.
Pretty even?
Yeah.
Okay, fair. How does all that quality control translate to cost? Because like you're saying, you're only capturing maybe a small percentage of those consumers who care. So how much can you legitimately charge versus the competitive set of those bigger name brands?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing is an effort to create something new, a paradigm that is different, that is quality based, that does not flinch at, oh, this is going to cost more. We have to figure out how to get that back, and just putting your head down and doing it. You know, that when we opened the Open Eye Cafe in Carrboro in 1999, there's no customers. Like we had to create our customer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what we put our head down and did is we found those opportunities to change people's minds about what coffee is possible. And it just dug in and just did it day after day after day till we built the clientele that allowed us to maintain that effort and then build from it going from there. And then it's like I said, it's just a percentage game after that. You just keep trying to grab onto a larger percentage of people. Some of that gets wrapped up into perception. Right, so if people, even if they can't tell how good the coffee is, they perceive that it is a
because
quality.
It's a higher priced item.
Well, partly, I think that there's a little bit to be said about that, but I think more importantly is the expectations of quality.
Yeah,
and that I know that I've heard of that brand, I know what they do, or maybe don't, but I expect quality from it, even if I can't tell the difference.
Yeah, because in all fairness, though, like Carrboro's not real. I mean, it's a.
Elaborate on that.
Which Carrboro? The one when I opened, or the one now?
But I mean, in the perspective that like this is a highly educated, very adventurous, knowledgeable community
Chapel
here.
Hill too,
and Chapel Hill, exactly.
Sure.
I mean, Carrboro, Chapel Hill.
Any university town has that going for them.
Yeah. So how does that translate outside of the triangle, and how is business outside of this area? And I guess that we can segue into your judging because you deal with the whole world there.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is, a lot has changed in a couple of decades. And one of the big things that's changed is awareness and the ability to know about the world more than where you live. And, and the internet has done a lot for that. Certainly, you have to be a critical thinker. But at the very least, an awareness of what coffee can be is being sort of pushed forward on the internet too. And so it really allows, even if you're not in a university town, it allows for people to be able to see, that's what a cappuccino is? Oh, maybe I should try to find who's doing that and try it, and figure it out. Or there's people who are like, I can do that. I want to offer that to the people that are in my community.
Yeah.
And see what happens. Really, and sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. But I have a good retrospective. I can see proof of principle over the decades, and clearly it's happening. That more and more people are appreciating it. We have the smartest consumer set we've ever had.
Totally.
Most
knowledgeable.
People are more knowledgeable. They're again, there's a mixed bag there. They're learning a lot of crazy things, but for the most part, they're elevating, and so the expectations are as high as they've ever been.
Yeah.
So you have to perform, and we saw that with COVID. If you weren't performing, a lot of those places just closed.
Yeah, you went away. Has there ever been a decision that you made that was business driven in the sense of like not necessarily sacrificing quality, but able to produce more volume, more like we call it in the wine business,
Just
a driver?
sell out, bro.
I am the worst business person you'll probably meet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
I
Lane that's
have
pushing
no
you.
desire to own a business. Like it's not what drives me. And,
Yeah.
I started saying like, here's what I want to do. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, it's fine. I'll walk away.
Okay, but everybody that's listening to this is saying, that's great, bro. How do you monetize that? How do you live?
And I'm here to show you that it can be done. Right. And that's part of the deal is, we're only ever going to be so big, and that's on purpose. Like we still have room to grow, but the whole point is it has to be a quality decision. Every decision you have to ask, how does this affect quality? You know, does it affect the quality of the products? Affect the quality of the atmosphere, the ambiance? Does it affect the customer service? That answers your question for you.
Yeah.
Right? It's right there. And I've always said that's how we're going to do it.
Yeah. That's right. See, look, business is calling. Business is calling. But,
if you don't do it that way, do we have to stop?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I literally just had this conversation. A future guest of the show, and we'll just in general, like there's a company that hand makes a product, and they have to hand make something, and that is their whole deal. And the products that they make could also be made by machines. And so the idea of automation and going to a different level is always out there and is always looming. And this is something that's universal for many people to think of. I mean, hell, I once worked for Kendall Jackson, right? And people will laugh and be like, oh, Kendall Jackson, they're just a big monster company and all that. But I will give Kendall Jackson their due in that even though they mass produce what they do, they actually build most of their product on the backbone of like how they originally did it. They just do it many times over.
I'll validate your point, Max, while you're saying that. When I was in Oregon, everyone knows about, 10 years ago, La Crema came in to buy Oregon. And
which is owned by Jackson family, just so, to make that parallel. Yeah.
And I asked the winemakers up there, how are they as partners? And they're like, they're great. They're like, they're doing everything ethically and doing correctly. So
it's crazy.
Just differently.
You know what's insane? And this is a little sidebar, a little tangent, but they have a sorting table, right? Like sorting table when you make wine, you get all the grapes, they come out on a conveyor, and typically a hand sorting table is how it works. We would all just be sitting here as it's going by, and you're looking through the grapes and you're pulling out all the bad stuff, and maybe a lizard got in there, maybe some stick stems. Yeah, right? Yep. So have you ever seen that? This is what KJ is doing now, but they have a machine that's like multi-million-dollar, and it spreads as the grapes are going down, it shoots them in the air, and there's a digitizer that can see and find
optical.
We've had those for years. The optical sorters and
look at me, I'm the old guy that's like
spectrophotometric.
Yeah, no big deal, bro.
Have you heard of the internet?
Yeah.
You can look up anything.
But it is an interesting question because those cost money. Those are very expensive.
Right.
So who can afford them, and how do you pay for them? Yeah. And those are all the questions we have with producers. Is maybe we pay more for the people to hand sort.
Yeah.
But how do we get away from that? Because the ideal is to do both.
Yeah.
Right? Really. If you can afford the sorters and the final hand sorting, but you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it all costs money.
If you're hand making things and you only have so many hands, you're going to need more hands to make more things, right? And but so that's kind of what you're doing. And you also have diversified your company because you are business to business, but then you have 3 locations, right? And we're right just a stone's throw away from one of them, Cafe Dryad, which I foolishly first went in here and I'm like walking and I'm like, where's the roastery? I don't know. This is just a coffee shop. What's going on? And then turned around and realized, this big massive building right next to it is the place where we're actually meeting. But talk to us about that, because I assume, I would have to think that the idea is to put your money where your mouth is and be an on-premise location as well, be customer-facing, use your own beans, make your own product, but also make a few bucks while you're doing it too, right? So what was the intention?
So that folds into proof of principle, right? And that was the idea of what I was saying earlier, which is we're only going to get so big, but we're like a template.
Right.
Like, we're fine.
Yeah.
You can do it this way. You don't have to do lowest common denominator and as low a price as you can get. The question is, can you build it appropriately and quality focused and have enough people to actually appreciate that? Maybe not right away, but over time. And so that's what we've done with the cafes. Now each cafe is its own personality, its own space. It's got its own sort of thing going on, but the base structure or the foundation of all of them are the same. Is we're going to make sure that only quality is created, whether that's the product or the ambiance or the customer service, and that experience is what you're coming back for, and you'll make a connection.
So are you involved in, Lane and I were looking over your coffee cocktail list of like all these like fun little things. And as a bartender by trade and looking at these things, I looked at it like, these are heady. These are like really interesting. I don't even know, Lane, maybe even if you have something to say about that part of the game, because it blew me away. I was like, whoa, this is really cool. Like what you're actually doing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do, especially at perennial cafe on West Franklin Street, is really evolve the coffee cocktail, mocktail business. So we'll take a coffee that we have. Moran, for example, is a good one. It has really fantastic caramel and apricot flavors, and not only does it make a really fantastic hot coffee, but it can be in a concentrate for cold coffee cocktails. So you can put it together with something like a ginger beer and basil and make a ginger beer cold brew. You can have grapefruits. You can do. Yesterday I was at home doing blackberry mint cold brew cocktails. So really fantastic. And Scott is a head judge on the Coffee and Good Spirits competition, which is international competition, where he literally goes and travels and gets the opportunity to taste the best coffee cocktails by mixologists from around the world and judges them. So literally just got back from Greece where he was doing that and bringing that the innovation and how to mix spirits and coffee together in really interesting, innovative ways, and bringing that to Carrboro and Chapel Hill where everybody can enjoy it is really quite fantastic.
Yeah. So talk about that.
Yeah, let's get into the judging. Because first explain, like, there are very few people that are to the level of judge as you are in this world. From what I understand, like, I mean, there's master sommeliers. That's a short list, especially domestic master sommeliers, very short list. So how many are there of you, like, roughly?
Head judges, I mean, there's probably a dozen. We're getting
in
more.
The world.
We're getting more every day, but yeah.
There are only a dozen people that really know what they're talking about.
30 what we call representatives who go to no. They're on their way, right?
Kidding.
That's the development block.
Like accolades.
Right.
Accolades.
And they go around the other countries and start helping those competitions. I think that the main takeaway here is that competitions, and maybe I should back up and talk about the structure of competitions.
Please,
before we throw that under the bus. So since 2000, there have been world coffee competitions. It started out with a barista competition, and then slowly they've added on so that there's now 7 different competitions that focus on a different aspect of the coffee world. So barista was the all-inclusive one, right? You had 15 minutes to make 12 beverages, 3 different categories, make 4 century judges in espresso, make them a milk beverage, and then make them this signature beverage, like something that you have created. And tell us why, right? Yeah. So it's a nice on stage. It was meant to give promotion to the barista. What is their job actually? How do you know that they're good? Give them a moment in the spotlight and give them basically, hopefully, give the world an idea of, oh no, this is what it actually should be, and this is what it can be. Like, why aren't we doing this all the time? And luckily, I've seen that over the past 20 plus years. Is that is what has started to change, and we look to the competitions as a place of best practice. We look at them as a place of innovation, right? So people are trying new things, and that's everything from different ingredients and builds, but also equipment and different methods of extraction. Like it's a really wonderful field for development in a big picture way, and it's really driven how people see, especially in the specialty world, how people see what coffee can and should be, and they start to mimic it. And that's how now... You
guys are like trendsetters in a way. Or
I can go anywhere in the world and I know there's a good coffee shop. And they're usually competitors, right? And so over the years, what ends up happening is every country has a national competition. And they can have different ones within their country. Like in the U.S., we have regional competitions first, and then you go to a national one, and then that person represents the country. And then the world competition moves around everywhere, around every different place around the world every year.
It is that fucking special.
Right.
So as Lane mentioned, this last year we did the barista competition and the Brewers Cup, which is literally just brewing coffee. Finding an amazing coffee, brewing it, talking about it, just coffee.
Okay.
Right? Very, very
you
straightforward.
Brew it there?
On stage.
Okay.
For the century judges, they evaluate it. Really complex scoring sheet, right? Really amazing ability to show what coffee can be just with this specific coffee they choose, but also how they choose to brew it and what they chose to do to get that flavor profile out of that coffee. And that was, we had 45 countries represented. There's anywhere usually up to 65 right now countries, so more than World Cup. Chock, yeah.
And that's got to be crazy too, because coffee is so organic in even its brewing process. I know that I'm always constantly changing the grind at the restaurant. You know, if it's humid, if it's cold, and everything is
requires
always
attention.
You're not just like, oh, this is like.
Set
If
it,
you have a
forget it.
recipe, it's the recipe, and it's always the same essentially. But there's something far more specific and erratic about brewing coffee. So I imagine doing that on stage,
All the
in
variables.
front of all those people, has got to be crazy.
And
That's
day
like
to day.
doing the Somm test and opening champagne while they're asking you at the table.
And there's a crowd watching you.
Yeah. But in that scenario, it sounds more like baking bread. Like you have to adjust for humidity and temperature and all
Yeah.
those sorts of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting is this is supposed to be the highest level. And I think some people get a little weird about it, and they're like, well, this isn't what I can do in my cafe. And so we said, well, what can we do in the cafe? Right? What can we take back from this high-level stage where we're all learning and we're all finding out what's possible? How can I put that in a place where I can't take 15 minutes to make your drink?
Yeah.
But what can I do?
Yeah.
You know, and right now we're doing a mocktail versions because we don't have a license for it. But it was setting the stage for what kind of ingredient combinations can we do. And then we got really into how do I recreate cocktails? What ingredients do I need? You know, I got some aquafaba. Great. I'm going to make this thing. And I can make a Negroni, but it's only with cold brew. And it's not actually with, there's no Campari.
Yeah.
So all of that fun stuff really sort of drove like what's possible. And then we literally just said, I hope somebody cares. Like, you don't know.
Yeah.
So luckily, 2 years on, we did it in the middle of the pandemic. So it was not the best timing, but
Do you have
people
any,
cared. People were like responding to it.
Do you have experience in like cocktail making or?
I was
any
never a
of that?
bartender, but when you were judging these competitions, you have to learn a lot, and I just sort of
Sure.
immersed myself in that, and I learned from everybody around me. We have in the competitions, we have a lot of guys who that is their background,
Right.
And I just glom onto them and pick their brains. And
Matt, going way back to like one of our like first year podcasting when we had Slingshot on,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Jenny and Jonathan Peaches Bonchak,
Yeah.
they both competed in Brewers Cup.
right? And I think Jonathan went pretty far. Well, I think Jenny too. Like I
Yeah.
thought they did really
went to
well.
nationals, yep.
But I remember hearing that conversation about that then, and just knowing like, this is a big deal. Are there any like I know that there are some movies like Somm that talks about like the process. Is there a good documentary anything that like follows that?
There's a bunch of them. I wouldn't call any of them good.
Good. Oh, maybe we
They're
have to make one.
okay. It's a start, Like if you were interested, it wouldn't be a bad way to sort of check it out and see. They're all sort of geared towards different viewpoints, basically. Like some of them are way more about the individuals as opposed to the competition itself, and they thought that would drive interest.
Yeah.
There is a mockumentary that's out right now,
A mockumentary.
which we thought
Oh,
would be a
nice.
great idea. Unfortunately, we didn't love it. We thought we should do it, but we'll see. Just making fun of just how high end this all is, and
Yeah.
and it does get there, but that's what makes the difference when people are really concerned about, oh, my coffee tastes like this today, but I have to compete again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Is it going to taste the same? And you have to make sure that it does, or be able to describe it for what it does taste like.
Yeah, because if you've seen, maybe even just talk to us like it's called a cupping, right? When you taste all the different coffees
evaluating coffee,
for
yeah.
evaluating, and like when I've seen it, the guys are doing the quick like,
Yes.
and they're like slurping and all
Aspirating, yep.
that. What is that? Why are we doing that?
So the idea behind cupping is that you've got a standardized method of brewing, right? And imagine if you and I, say you're in Peru,
Okay.
right? And we both got the same coffee. We both want to evaluate it and give each other our feedback for evaluation for that coffee. We don't want to worry about all the variables. We don't have to worry about how did you roast that coffee? How did you brew that coffee? Like,
Yeah.
what did you do? Because if those become a problem or a variable, you can't have the same conversation anymore. So cupping standardizes all of how you prepare that coffee so that you can just talk about the coffee. So that's why it's very specific and it's got rules about how you do it. That would allow you to basically focus on the actual coffee itself.
I like that. That's cool.
All right. So for the baristas and the burgeoning coffee professionals listening, how do they get to be a part of this society and a part of this world coffee competition?
So one of the secrets of, I say, the coffee industry in general is volunteering. The whole thing's a volunteer organization.
Okay.
And so the competitions. And so that's how I started. Of course, when I started, that's all there was to do. Or you could get a job, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to do it too, as long as you're honest with your employer and give back as much as you take.
Yeah.
But volunteering is a great way to get insight, to get information, and you can do it at the level that you're interested at that time, and then you can see if you want to progress or not. Nobody walks in and is a judge, right? I mean, it happens, but it's pretty rare, and it depends on their background,
Sure.
your actual experience background.
So there's no like examination to become
There
a
is.
judge.
There is, yeah.
Okay.
And so every country's a little different, so I can't speak for all of them. But in the U.S., we've worked. That was part of my job when I first developed as the chair of that competition committee, was developing a format, that showed people a pathway.
Yeah.
Right. That it's not just I think you're good. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh no, let's show you how you progress through this. Let's show you what else is available after that. Are you done at a national level? Have you had enough experience and you're interested in the world level? Whole nother certification process. And that's kind of my thing, is back to wanting to know everything and learn as much as possible. Like, learning is what drives me. And so part of learning is also sort of checking yourself. Like, I'm going to take every certification there is, because A, you learn, and B, you sort of check out where you are and what else you need to learn.
Yeah, you don't want to show up to Greece judging a competition and be a fraud, right?
Yeah.
What are some of the most exciting things, innovations happening in coffee right now, or being like happening within like production, roasting, or farming places?
It's hard to pick one. I know you
have to pick one.
I know
You can
we
just give
talked
me
about a couple of things that were takeaways from Greece this year, and it does change. It cycles.
Yeah.
You'll see different things being highlighted over the years, and some of them stick around for a little bit, and then they'll move on when somebody dreams up something new. It could be a brewing device. It can be a method of preparation or process for the coffee itself, and we see more and more people experimenting with process, and that's basically anything that you do with the coffee cherry after you pick it.
Yeah.
There's dozens and dozens of steps and hundreds of things you can do to it that will affect what you end up tasting. And there's a lot of power in processing, and as you know, in wine too. And I think that's where you see a lot of producers and a lot of people sort of as buyers or even roasters sort of having that conversation, and hopefully actually making it a conversation so that it's supported, because it usually requires extra effort. The other thing I think was really exciting was an ongoing presence of coffee producing countries doing well. So that was not true the first decade plus, right? It was
Doing well
It was
economically?
consuming countries that were actually winning the competitions.
Oh, I see. Doing well in the competition.
Right? And then over years, because resources, because all the things that were holding them back, and again, there's an opportunity to volunteer, so I did. Let's go into Honduras. Let's figure out how we can help these competitors get better and get them on the world stage. And now you're seeing it. And so this year, a gentleman from Brazil won the barista competition.
Oh, cool.
His brother got third in the brewers competition.
Okay.
So this is just fantastic to see the people who are from where the coffee actually grows presenting that coffee.
Yeah.
And showing you
It's
how
a
good
nice
it can be.
evolution of the whole industry
Exactly.
in itself. That's cool. I do know, like, when I was first opening up Crafted and we were like trying to do the coffee shop on ourselves and everything, we could have gotten help and had like someone like yourself come in and like help show us the ropes, or you could have done what I did and just said, no, I got it. I can do everything. I can figure it out. I once worked at Barnes & Noble Coffee 18 years ago, and I can figure it out. But for those that are looking to do that, like if you're either your own restaurant, you're just going to expand and kind of do your own little like coffee program, or if you're just going to open up your own coffee shop or so, I know that you help out in that way. What does that mean? Like, how does Carborro Roasters like help a business open a coffee shop?
There's certain things that we can be a support system for. I mean, one of the things as a wholesale roaster is there's a little bit of expectation of being one-stop shopping, and to the degree that it makes sense, that's what we do. But more importantly, we want to be that support system for people. So in your case, we would have been like, great, let's talk about your layout. Let's talk about what equipment. Let's talk about how we're going to interact with these things. How do you want your customers to move? There's lots of opportunities for us to support clients who want to do a good job.
Yeah.
Beyond that, there's definitely gray areas of like, how much do we do as for clients, and how much does it start to become consulting? Which is another hat I wear. But it's all possible, and I think that's the key: is that every individual or every group comes to us with a different list of things that they need from us, and we've been doing it long enough, and I've built many cafes, not just my own, all over the world, and we have that sort of in our pocket.
Cool. Yeah. What's for the average consumer? what should they be looking for to ethically and responsibly purchase coffee?
I would use us as an example. I mean, I think that there's a lot of people, you have to be careful because there's a lot of people who will go to Origin and take a bunch of pictures. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. You got some pretty pictures. But what did you do? What impact did you have? Did you have something beyond buying? Did you buy that coffee more than once? Like, how are you affecting the bigger picture? And that is hard to do as a consumer. And so we try to make it easy, right? We try to use the bag as a way of like drawing you in and giving you that information as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Visuals, information, a little bit of choose your own adventure. I just dated myself. About what do you want to know and what are you interested in, and you can figure it out on your own and then maybe come back to it again later. And I would do that with anybody. You know, what are they putting forth? What are they presenting with? How does that show you who they are and how they're affecting the industry?
It's like or should we look for fair trade certification or any of those, you know, certifying bodies? Or
certifications aren't bad. I think that they're a great starting point, and I think every industry they impact differently. There's other industries where something like fair trade or organic
certified B Corp
are way more impactful than the specialty coffee industry. And I think that's the point, is that we're in an industry that already cares.
Okay.
Right. And so that's a really good starting point where, you know, sugar and cocoa, that's not where they're at.
Yeah.
So it helps them more than it would help us. And I think that the big reason I sort of say it's a good starting point is because it's not enough.
Okay.
It's usually, it's pennies on the dollar. It's something.
Yeah.
But it needs to be more than that. And I always worry that people feel good about that and they walk away.
Yeah.
And that's not actually what needs to happen. What needs to happen is a much higher price point. We have historically always paid too little for coffee compared to the work that's involved.
Yeah.
And we need to readjust and really understand what's actually happening. And we're always happy to show you, well, here's what the actual costs were. Do you understand now, like how that all needs to work out for everybody through the whole thing?
Yeah.
Because sometimes those fair trade certifications, just like we know in the wine industry, like organic and all that stuff, like most of them are bullshit, and they're just a money-making endeavor, or they started off with good intention.
I think there's good intentions,
and
I think it's a little bit of a system now.
Yeah, or people just, maybe not the organization themselves, but other people find loopholes, and they're like,
oh, sure.
Oh, well, we could get the stamp, and then we don't have to do X, Y, and Z, but we still look like we're doing it. And so it's like, in the spirit that it was intended, let's try to make this the way we want to do it.
And there are costs involved. I'm on the ground. We're there. We know what's happening. We're having those conversations. I can tell you exactly how stuff was harvested and processed. And I don't need a third party.
Yeah.
Right? To come and verify that. I'm doing it. And it costs the producer money to get that verification. So why should they spend that money? They don't need it. And we're going to pay them more money.
Like I'm making the reference because, I get that asked to me all the time.
Sure.
How should I know how to buy my wine? Right. And I give them like some tricks. So like the first thing I would tell you is find yourself an independent retailer who you can have a conversation with, who actually knows and learns your palate.
Good.
But I'm thinking about like the average person who's doing the shopping for the family, and they're going through, dare I say, the grocery store, right? Like, but they still want to be ethical and responsible about the coffee and support like the true farmers. How do they know what to look for?
It's harder in a grocery store or a market like that. And you have to think about what market am I going to and what are their practices in purchasing and sales. If you're going to a larger chain, then you're going to be limited in what's possibly going to have a positive impact.
Yeah. So it's the same conversation.
Go to a smaller one.
Go to a smaller coffee store who really knows what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you make the extra stop?
Yeah. Do you do a recurring ordering system online? Like, can you get
absolutely.
on? Yep. Okay, because that makes it easy, right?
On
like
our website, you can just do subscriptions.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
They can be revolving subscriptions.
That's the way
you
to
can
do
buy
it.
them one-offs. Yeah.
So that's the trick. Yeah. Get yourself a subscription to Carrboro Roasters.
There you go.
Carrboro Coffee
I
Roasters.
should have led with that.
Well, now you know.
I told you I was a horrible business person.
You're learning. You love to learn. I'll leave you with this question. I'm just like, as far as sense of place, is there a particular place that is a non-traditional coffee growing region that is on the up and coming
Yes.
should be on our radar?
So I've been able to do a lot of work that was developmental in a couple of places that have actually had coffee for a long time, but nobody really knew. It
wasn't, like, commercially viable.
Yeah. Or it was
Holly Springs, North Carolina.
Hey.
Yeah.
It's a greenhouse.
Yeah.
So one of them that we've had some work with that I was actually a head judge for one of their private collection auctions was Taiwan. And a lot of people don't realize that they've been farming coffee for 100 years.
Yeah.
But most of it's been internal or shipped only to Japan. And so this auction was meant to open up and show the world, like, no, this coffee is great. It's happening in that huge mountain system right in the middle of the island. Really high elevations, just really high quality, not a lot of volume. But how do you get there, right? You have to start that ball rolling, and that's what it did. And 2 private collection auctions later, the intent was, let's build this into the bigger program. So the collection auctions were meant to sort of be like highlighting and awareness. And there's like 15, 16 coffees, just enough to get the world to be like, oh, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
And then we actually have the Cup of Excellence program, which is a much larger organism. It's a much larger systematic process for evaluating coffees from every country, which is another thing that I'm a head judge for. And we spend a month of time finding out the best coffees every harvest from these countries. And we finally, but you have to get to a point where that's possible. And that's where Taiwan finally got to. And it's really exciting.
That's amazing. By the way, is coffee the same in terms of one harvest per year?
Roughly. There's places where you can get a fly crop where, Colombia is famous for having a secondary, but it's much smaller. And it can be very different, and it could be based on elevation and all those things. That elevation's a big part of coffee that's different than a lot of other agricultural.
Yeah, because there's a couple of regions in Brazil that have 2 wine harvests a year.
That's nuts.
Yeah, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah.
It makes for interesting conversation, but sometimes you can get something special out of that if you're taking care and being careful about the whole process.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Scott Lane, thank you for taking us on a journey through coffee, coming out here to Carrboro. The place is beautiful. I'm going to have to pop into a Cafe Adriato after this because I haven't had enough caffeine. I want to go bouncing off the walls even more and get some of those little cafe cocktails that you have. But I appreciate you letting us come in here to learn more about what you do here.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah.
Scott Lane, thank you so much. For everybody out there, please get yourself some Carrboro Coffee Roasters and you will drink extremely merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.